Hello, and welcome to another lecture. And today we'll be talking about environment and health security taken together. And the readings are particularly helpful because they go through all the different applications of of theories to the particular case of environmental security and health security. Now, what's interesting to know is that when it comes to health security and environmental security, the state cannot solve outbreaks. The state can't solve climate change. One state alone cannot solve the problem. And so even though the United States or, one country takes the necessary steps to change and reduce climate change, if other countries don't do the same, then ultimately we're going to have the same issue remain. And that's particularly it's difficult to get states to cooperate because the necessary thing is if you tie your hands and another state refuses to do so, then the state that refuses to do so wins. They gain more. So let's assume that the United States tomorrow says we're going to stop just using oil and using gas and stop nuclear energy. Um, we're gonna help the situation. Well, you reduce your ability to grow economically, so you hurt yourself. Um, so you hurt yourself for the sake of this higher goal. Um, and other countries like China, India, Russia, um, and Pakistan, these are the most significant polluters. And the United States has effectively reduced its carbon footprint by a third since the 1990s. So that's something that we need to really appreciate and look at. It's like, hey, we're headed in the right direction. Are we there yet? No. But, as prices for electric cars come down, as the technology improves, particularly in batteries, solar powered storage, I think that this country will be moving in the right direction. But for now, cutting all oil and gas, cutting all investments in oil and gas would essentially hurt the country and cause a lot of economic problems. So, in a realist sense, realism and state behavior can't solve the problem. One state cannot do this on their own. You can't, and also, since states are basically defined by their militaries, military intervention is not going to help the situation. What you need is cooperation. You need cooperation and regime theory to provide the necessary architecture to promote collaboration on environmental issues and health issues, and they're tied together. Health issues and environmental issues are intrinsically tied. Now, the one of the readings for today, it's called the Trombetta's Environmental Security and Climate Change, looks at the various theories and applies them to the issue of environmental change. So they talk about realism and liberalism and securitization, but I think the securitization concept is not effectively applied in the article. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it for you in a very, very easy way, very simple way. Um, in 2019, Alexandria Ocasio Cortez um, makes a sort of statement. It's a sweeping statement, but it's an interesting one. She said the world is going to end in 12 years if we don't do something about climate change. So what she's trying to do is securitize environmental security. She's trying to say that if we don't do something, then we're all gonna die. The end of the world, whatever that means, the end of the world is coming. So what she's doing essentially is using a speech act to make a convincing case, or she's trying to make a convincing case. There's certainly going to be those people who jump on that and say, well, this is urgent. And there's going to be other people who aren't convinced. Now, the idea of a speech act is that you are convinced that the world is indeed going to end in 12 years. If you are convinced and you change your behavior, if you get the government to enact strategies that facilitate the change, that facilitate changes in policy, reductions in the use of pipelines, or making drilling for oil illegal completely. All this is within the grasp of the American government to do, to destroy those industries. But that has not been done. But what AOC is trying to do is she's trying to push for this, push for less support for oil and gas industries. And of course, there will be effects, right? So during the Trump administration and even before with Obama, the United States began to produce more oil than anyone else in the world and actually began exporting oil. And when Biden comes in, he stops the pipeline as is promised to do so, the Keystone Pipeline, and this severely limits the supply of oil into the United States and therefore returning some dependence on oil, on Saudi Arabia for oil and gas. And with OPEC basically promising to cut production by 2 million barrels per day, we might see a 5 to 10% increase in the price of oil, which effectively will then translate into increases in gasoline prices. So all of this is to say that environmental security, if you want to achieve environmental security, there's going to be trade-offs that you're going to have to accept. And what you need to do is try to create a regime where countries can get together and sort of try to make this convincing argument for the end of of fossil fuels. There were several attempts to do so. With first of all, the Kyoto Accord, where the United States, during the Clinton administration, they were negotiating this regime where countries would exchange tokens in order to pollute more. So if you want to pollute more for whatever reason, you buy tokens from other countries. The George W. Bush became president and he pulled out of the Kyoto Accord because he didn't want the hands of the United States to be tied into this agreement, into this accord. So fundamentally, the Kyoto Accord was this drive to reduce the carbon footprint of countries in the world by facilitating these exchanges in tokens. Then there was the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement was another climate change regime that tried to reduce the carbon footprint of the United States, and it was negotiated by the Obama administration, but Donald Trump was elected and he pulled out of the climate accord, Paris Climate Accord. I believe President Biden is seeking to rejoin the Paris Agreement, so we'll see what becomes of that. So environmental security is essential. I mean, obviously, if you don't have a healthy environment, the individuals are going to suffer a great deal. So there will be a disaster in terms of human life, human suffering. And so ultimately, the more polluted our world becomes, the more people will suffer and die. So this is tied to health security. Environmental security and health security are intrinsically tied. Let's take an example. So in China, in about 2015, there was a study that took place in China that said up to 4,000 people die a day due to pollution, and that's about 1.6 million people a year die from pollution alone. If you go out in China, let's say you want to take a lovely afternoon stroll with your partner down the streets of Beijing, you exit your house or your apartment or your hotel at around 10 o'clock in the morning, go for your stroll, and you come back after your long adventure. You come back to your apartment around 7 o'clock in the evening. Your shirt will no longer be white. It will be some color of a yellow, a gross yellow. And that's because of the amount of pollution and the smog in Beijing. In Mongolia is heavily reliant on coal to heat homes. And in the capital city, babies are born with severe lung problems because of the amount of carcinogens in the air, the amount of poison in the air. And ultimately, that's a trade-off. You know, the more unhealthy the environment, the more unhealthy we will be, because obviously we live on the environment. And this is all scientific. There's no time limit. There's no urgency. I mean, these sorts of things are happening now. You know, there's no the world is going to end in 12 years. These are issues that exist not just in China, not just in Mongolia, but in the United States. A lot of people are dying of cancers down in the Gulf of Mexico. That oil spill back in 2008 or 9, um, the the BP explosion over there, that caused a lot and created a lot of cancer and problems for people living over there. Killed a lot of wildlife and hurt business. So it's really everything is related, and that's why the Copenhagen School is such a powerful tool. If you go back to securitization literature, there's this beautiful little uh, matrix that looks at military security, economic security, environmental security, political security, and so forth. And it shows a relationship of this to that. And so whatever you do in life, there will be a trade-off. If you want to uh, continue to grow economically, you can use the cheapest energy out there, which is coal. You can use coal to your heart's content. Are you going to kill off your citizens? Absolutely. So it's good that we're moving towards solar and renewables, because I mean that will help repair some of the damage we've done to Mother Earth here. So humanity's existence relies on the health and welfare of the natural world. I can't make that more clear. It's very important that if that's your takeaway for today, I think that's altogether acceptable. And so that's the problem with the world order, is that we're striving towards economic growth because economic growth leads to power. Economic growth leads to a healthy population that is well off. However, the more that you pollute, the more economic activity you have, it's going to be detrimental to the environment, especially if you look at manufacturing. If you've ever been to the old steel mills of Pennsylvania back in those days, it would rain ash and other chemicals onto the cars and into the lungs of people. So there's a lot of things that we have to take note here, and this has been part of the historical experience ever since as far back as people can remember. Back in ancient Mesopotamia, the overexploitation of the land resources led to droughts and ultimately the desertification of much of Egypt and Iraq. I mean, they were not um, deserts in thousands of years ago. During the Epic of Gilgamesh and even Moses, these places were known as the breadbaskets of civilization. This is where civilization began, on the rivers of the Euphrates and the Nile. And because of the overexploitation, it caused droughts, and droughts led to, of course, famine, and famine leads to death, obviously. There's another great example is the Black Death of the 14th centuries. So the Black Death of the Black Death came about because rats from China or from Asia jumped a European-bound ship, and those rats had fleas, and those fleas carried the Black Death. So the boat made it to port. People were dying on the ship, but then the rats, when the boat came to port, the rats came off of the ship, and they went and lived among the people who weren't really known for their hygiene back in those days, and that killed up to 1/3 of the human race. So poor living conditions, poor sanitation, poor just dirty situations led to, of course, the Black Death being such a horrible experience. Now, climate change is becoming more relevant as we go on, and I'm not going to discuss whether or not, to what effect climate change is caused by human activity. Let's assume that there is a relationship between human activity and climate change, at least as a factor that exacerbates or worsens the effects of climate change. I haven't read the literature for quite some time, although I'm pretty much convinced that there is some relationship, and because of this relationship, we understand that there's going to be we're headed down a bad road. And so, what can we do to slow that change? It can be from the top down or it can be from the bottom up. When I say top down, policies. So, governments can make policies that can affect the behavior of individuals, or the behavior of individuals can help slow the exacerbation of climate change. Now, some of the things that the World Health Organization has said, the connections between climate change and health security is obviously the more that we degrade our environment, the less clean air we'll have, the less safe drinking water we'll have. Food security will be called into question, as well as possibly increased frequency of hurricanes, tornadoes, and other disasters, droughts, and that could all have a negative effect on human life. There's also malnutrition. If famine if famine continues to be a problem, then we're going to have some serious climate change. Serious human and health issues. There's also flood risks going on, and that will kill create famine and destroy crop yields. But also greenhouse gases that heat up the environment and make it very difficult. I've read a research paper that linked the 2015-2016 Zika virus epidemic to climate change. So the mosquitoes, instead of being concentrated in certain areas of the global south, that the warming environment led the mosquitoes to spread into densely populated centers in Latin America. And it's because the climate change is happening, because temperatures are warming, that we are seeing the Zika virus take place, because these mosquitoes need warm places to grow, and urban areas became affected. Areas that were not known for the Zika virus became central to the Zika virus, leading to a number of birth defects, which is really quite tragic, actually. Very heartbreaking to see those pictures coming out. And so, can one state stop this? No one state can stop this. This is going to need global policy. Diseases today are easily transmitted across borders, through air and water, through human and animal. And these vulnerabilities create real problems, real significant problems for all countries in the international system. And because if there's an outbreak like we saw with COVID-19, that there'll be economic shutdowns, and these economic shutdowns will have psychological effects. These psychological effects are no doubt going to have real significant impacts on individuals, especially younger individuals who need to be socialized in classrooms, play with people, play with friends, understand the body language, the meanings, the social meanings of things, and so on. So, all of this has spin-off effects, and many people argue that COVID-19 and the lockdowns, we will continue to learn the unforeseen impact or unforeseen effects for many years to come. I just returned from a conference over the weekend that discussed that COVID, the lockdowns, created a real problem in the classroom. Students are not as integrated in society, and this is going to have serious learning disabilities, may cause learning problems in the future. So I'm quite concerned about that, being in the field, what kind of impact this will be 20 years from now, if I'm around 23 years from now. So all of this is difficult. All this has a real problem. And interesting, like if you're going to come back, take a step back and do some comparative contagion, the Byzantine Empire was really quite affected by the Black Plague. I think 40% of the population in the Byzantine Empire died because of the Black Plague, and this led to the collapse of the ultimate collapse of the Byzantine Empire to the Turks, the Ottomans, in in 1453, if I'm not mistaken. So economic relations obviously is like intrinsically tied to the idea of health security. Health, it's all connected, and I think that's pretty cool. The Spanish flu of 1918, many argue that the Spanish flu came about because of trench warfare. So the gutted landscapes of Belgium and France led to a high level of transmission among soldiers who, um, apparently came from a pig farm in America. And so one of the soldiers who was exposed, he was sent to Europe, and he gave it to all the soldiers, and the soldiers gave it to the nurses, and the nurses gave it to everybody else. And that killed more people. The Spanish flu killed more people than World War One. We're talking 100+ million people died during the Spanish flu, and so that was a significant contagion. Uh, so with COVID-19 did kill millions of people, but I don't think we're near. Let me take a look at the numbers. So approximately 6.56 million people died of COVID-19. It's possibly much more than that, but that is the estimation according to the CDC. So that being said, I'm not going to get into the beginnings of COVID-19 because I don't know. I mean, we don't know what happened. We don't know for sure, but many people argue that it was caused by exploitation of animals and wet food markets in Wuhan, China. So essentially, uh, it came from the environment. It had environmental beginnings. It was created in the environment. I'm not going to get into the back and forth or the debate of that, but I mean that seems to be what people have said, the experts, right? So another great example is Ebola, the Ebola virus. The Ebola virus has connections with environmental degradation, and so poor living conditions in West Africa, especially in settings with like schools and health facilities, exacerbated the Ebola crisis in 2014, 2015. And so the struggle to contain Ebola has clearly been illustrated by the role of running water or the lack of proper infrastructure for running water, basic toilets, and good hygiene. So all of this degradation of the environment has led to the Ebola outbreak. But we don't even have to go that far. We don't really have to go all the way to Africa or China or the Black Death. Air pollution in major cities have led to major health issues such as the inability of blood to absorb oxygen, impairing of reflexes, there's reproductivity problems, infections, lung irritations, asthma, cancer, heart disease, lung disease, kidney damage, and of course damage to animals and livestock. Flora and fauna. Ultimately, so the way that we manage pollution really does need to change, and many doctors and health specialists have made those recommendations. You know, weather patterns changing. All of these are tied to the suffering of people, the destruction of crops, and so forth. So, what can we do? What can we do? Should we change just capitalism in general? Should we just go full on emergency, stop all importation and stop all extraction of oil and gas, and stop using um, gasoline? Should we just go electric? What about the lithium mining? Doesn't that have? Isn't that lithium? That's what the necessary ingredient to make these electric batteries. Should we just stop mining that? In Greenland, there was a mining company called Greenland Minerals. I studied this. I did a case study on this, where they were trying to extract rare earth minerals from Greenland. They had a contract or some kind of contract with the government to do so. And then a left wing government came in and said, no, 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 we don't want that because it's going to destroy our environment. So we need the rare earths to create the batteries to help us reduce the carbon footprint. Yet there are groups that don't want to extract the minerals so that we can do this. I mean, you can't have everything. You got to pick your poison, literally. You got to pick your poison here. So I think more needs to be done regarding, what we can do. But it can't be from the top down. The government can't do this, right? The government can't solve our problems. I think the best course of action is, from my understanding, you can do that. You can make the regulations and make life difficult for people who don't have the money to invest in a battery electric car, and cut off their oil and gas. How are they going to get to work? That's just like a very kind of a stretch of an example, but just bear with me. I'm trying to set up some kind of like debate. Or you can try to encourage individuals to invest in alternative energies, invest in those technologies that kind of produce clean energy. So making clean energy, generating clean energy, hydropower, ocean, tidal energy, solar power. I'm a big fan of solar power and biomass, but as well nuclear power. Nuclear power is not bad. Essentially, they are less harmful for the environment than oil and gas and coal. But I mean, solar. We're just not there yet. We're not there. Also, there's a lot of negativity regarding wind energy, but I mean that's the debate. You can't have a nice skyline, and I think they're pretty cool to look at, those wind turbines. I think they're pretty neat. So I don't have a problem with it. But there's other technologies like carbon capture and storage technologies. This is in the works. There are people who are trying to figure out ways to capture the carbon in the air and store that carbon, maybe even use it in building or some sort of technology. There's also the promotion of alternative forms of transportation, carpooling, mass transit, bullet trains. There's also methane gas reduction. There are people that are trying to eat less meat. Like I'm trying to eat less meat. I'm trying to eat more beans and reduce my carbon emissions. Right? My That's a bit of a joke. Beans, There's also ways in which you can recycling, composting. All of these are things that you can do as an individual to lower your carbon footprint. And so that just a thought. Like there's a lot of agency here. States can't do this, obviously. Countries can get together and promote solutions, but many countries like the United States simply don't want their hands tied. Because of China, they don't want to limit their economic growth. If China is going to be polluting, we should be polluting too, because there's that urgency there. So essentially, there's a lot of things to unpack, but health, there's some takeaways. The readings help a lot with that. The Trombetta reading has a great little summary of the major themes discussed in the lecture. And I looked at a few more historical examples, kind of get your brains thinking in those under those frameworks. Um, yeah, there's a lot to unpack, but I hope you enjoyed this lecture. And again, if you need anything, reach out. Happy to hear from you as always. Thank you.